Welcome into It's Just Wrestling, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm feeling a little bit, I don't know if it's spicy, I don't know what it is today, but man, my limit of what I can handle, I feel like I'm getting very close to it, because I had an idea of what today's show was going to be, and I had an idea of what I wanted to dive into, and then I saw there was a press release, and that WWE and TNA have come to terms on a multi-year partnership, and so we're going to get to that. But I have to, at some point today, get to what's happening in AEW with Dynamite, what has happened, the biggest story on Raw this week, which also happens to be somewhat related to AEW. And I have to try to reconcile just how weird and almost borderline dystopian things have gotten with AEW, at least compared to where they were a few years ago. It is on full display. And if you're like me and you are a day one supporter of AEW and you are being fair about the state of the company and the state of what is on your screen every week and the storytelling and the matches, it's not the same. The matches are still of a high enough quality, but the rest of it is just brutal. And now you have talents that have either left or appear to be leaving soon. And all I'm left with is wondering what the hell is going on over there and what are we doing? Genuinely, what are we doing? Now, if you can't handle a little bit of negativity on one of your favorite companies, apologies to you today, but I always say that I am fair on this show. I will tout the good and I will out the bad. That's actually pretty catchy for both the WWE and AEW, and to some extent, TNA and NXT. Now, I want to start with the biggest story, or at least what I would consider to be the biggest story of the week, and it's the biggest thing that happened on Monday Night Raw. And you might disagree. You might think that the Punk and Rollins and McIntyre segment were something that's really worth getting into today. I don't necessarily agree with that to the same level, but I'm going to get into the thing that had me the most intrigued, that had me the most excited, that had me with my phone and my laptop up while down covering. For those of you who don't know what I do during a lot of the week, when the Philadelphia Flyers and the NHL have a home game, I go down and host a pregame, intermission, and postgame show in the balcony level of Wells Fargo Center. It's actually a side gig. It's not even my regular day job, but I go down and I do that. So I'm typically paying full attention to the game. But one thing had my attention that wasn't the game on the ice. It's a guy who made his debut in the WWE, and it's why I said that it's all part of a much larger conversation that needs to be had about AEW and where things stand. It was the debut of Penta, not Pentagon Jr., not Penta El Cero M, not Penta El Cero Miedo, not Penta El Cero Cero Miedo, Miedo Cero Miedo. Just Penta. Imagine that, just going with a simple name, Penta. Okay, we have seen for weeks now different kinds of leading graphics, right? Not really promos of any kind, just nice graphics that eventually cued that, oh, it's going to be Penta. And then the day of Raw, all of the big aggregators and the insiders and all of those sites and blogs, they happen to point out the fact that, well, at that point, WWE.com was already selling Penta merch, including the man's likeness on the site. So it was kind of spoiled ahead of time, but if you don't live online and you just tune in on every Monday night to watch Raw on Netflix, I don't know if you know Raw's on Netflix, but Raw's on Netflix. Maybe they'll talk about it 40 more times on the next telecast. Penta makes his debut against Chad Gable. Penta did a bunch of things in this match that you might not have been used to seeing him do in AEW. He did pull back a little bit. He pulled back a little bit of the high flying in this match. But he sold in this match. There was in-ring psychology. Chad Gable worked more of a Mexican-style match. And it worked. The man was over with the crowd from the second that generic-ass Def Rebel music hit. From the second that music hit to the second that those fire pyros went off behind him, to him pulling on the mask, to him revealing himself, to taking off the jacket, giving some high fives, getting in the ring, pointing around the ring. That man was over. Now, some people, probably AEW fans, were like, whoa, that's very interesting. Because the WWE fans say that they don't watch AEW, so how in the world could they have possibly reacted to this Penta fellow if they've never watched AEW? To which I respond, there is a good chance that WWE fans who don't live online may have looked up who Penta is, especially after last week when it was announced, shown on that graphic that Penta was perhaps going to be debuting soon. And they looked up Penta and they found his work in Lucha Underground and in TNA and in AEW. How about that? And maybe even in AAA. Maybe they saw him there as well. And they went, oh, this guy's very good. I like this Penta guy. He doesn't look like every other luchador that has been brought in that has served the luchador purpose in WWE for years. Penta looks different. Penta's unique. So he was over from the second he got out there. Wrestled a match that I honestly thought he hurt his knee. I really did. He sold it that well. Looked great. He and Gable had a wonderful match together. Penta's accomplishments in Lucha Underground were brought up by Michael Cole on commentary. The TNA World Championship was also brought up on TV, which was also of note. His time in AEW, as you would expect, not mentioned. But if you watch that match, and especially if you're like me and you've watched every single Penta match in AEW, can you honestly say that there have been many more times where he's been presented as more of a single star than he was in that moment in this first match in San Jose, the second episode of Raw on Netflix? Because if we're being real here, there were times that Penta had star power. I go back to the cage match between the Lucha Bros and the Young Bucks, where the Lucha Bros came out with the tag titles, but that wasn't as a single star. And honestly, one of the things I found most perplexing and most frustrating about Penta's time in AEW is that he was booked to kind of be a singles loser, which, by the way, happens a lot in AEW, where guys that the company kind of builds up as tag team wrestlers don't find a lot of success in singles. It almost pigeonholes you into believing they don't have the ability to win a singles match. I look at Dax Harwood, a very good wrestler, a very good tag team wrestler, but whenever he has a singles match, it's a good match, but he doesn't win. For a long time, it felt like Mark Briscoe, who, yes, along with his brother Jay, were one of the best tag teams of their generation. It sure felt like when he first got into AEW, he couldn't win singles matches because he was known as a tag team guy. And that list, by the way, goes on and on. Ray Phoenix had some big wins, was booked more of the successful of the single star between him and Penta, but I thought a lot of times also got kind of tossed to the side, was just kind of cannon fodder for other guys that they were trying to elevate to the main card. So Penta makes this debut. He gets the win. The commentary team puts him over in a big way. And then he does something, and again, I could be wrong, and you are more than welcome to point it out if I am, and I will eat crow if I am wrong. But then Penta cuts a promo that's roughly like 60-40 Spanish. But he cuts a decent enough promo in English, cuts a passionate promo to all of his fans in the arena and in Mexico, gets a big pop when he starts speaking in Spanish. And he talks about how this is what happens when a Mexican wrestler chases down his dream. He says, "This is my new home. I have been waiting for this. It's not just the Netflix new era, it's the Penta new era." I mean, for God's sake, like if we're being real here, right? If you try to think, how many times did Penta cut an English promo in AEW? I think of Alex Abrahantes, who seems like a lovely guy. But what was the thing? Penta says, where Alex Abrahantes is meant to be kind of like the mouthpiece of Penta, because Penta would only ever really speak Spanish in his promos. Now, was this just a really well-rehearsed thing, or perhaps could they have leaned on Penta to speak English at least a little bit in AEW to get him aligned with the crowd? You know, one of the things that I saw in the aftermath of this, and then I heard on podcasts all throughout the week, where I don't know what he said, and McAfee said this on commentary. I don't know what he said, but I loved it. And what you got, even if you don't speak Spanish, I happen to, but if you don't, you at least could understand the passion that he was cutting that promo with. And I just walked away from this entire thing, from the match, from the presentation, from the promo, and I said, oh boy, if you're an AEW wrestler, the balance of power has shifted tremendously in a few years since Vince McMahon was ousted from WWE. You look at how Cody Rhodes was getting booed out of the building. Everybody wanted him to turn heel, or a lot of people wanted him to turn heel at the end of his AEW run. He goes off and becomes this mega star in WWE with virtually the same presentation that he had in AEW. But he goes back to the company that he got his start with, the company that some people associate with his dad with because of NXT especially. He becomes the top babyface in the company, ultimately becomes the undisputed champion. You look at somebody like Jade Cargill, who is green and who was given an undefeated streak in AEW and then ultimately chooses to leave and hasn't found the same kind of singles success, at least winning gold, but was put in a tag team with Bianca Belair. And the star power was still very much there. And you look at Jade Cargill and you say, how do you botch having somebody with the kind of star power and the same kind of aura and the look that she has? How do you let that person leave? That's another one. Now, you could make a case that Brian Pillman Jr. going off and doing his thing in NXT, whether that's worked or not, and whether or not Ethan Page leaving and becoming NXT champion has been inspired or not. And he had an interview where he talked about his time in AEW versus WWE this week, which I'm not getting into. No offense to Ethan Page. It's just not worth it right now. But if you look at how they're marketing these stars who make the jump, and your contract is coming up in AEW, is there any point to staying? And I mean that, again, as somebody who has supported that company since its inception, who has purchased nearly every AEW pay-per-view over the last 4 years, maybe not the first year. I don't think I paid for, and I certainly didn't illegally stream the first year of pay-per-views. So let's say like the last 4. Like, I actively choose to support that company. And yet, I am flabbergasted by how they botched Penta. I am shocked by how they apparently have botched Malachi Black, who got to taste Trios Gold, who wrestled sporadically for a few years, who it felt like anytime he wrestled the singles match, there was speculation that he was leaving the company, and then he'd have to go onto Instagram and he'd have to post a video saying, I'm healthy, I'm available to work, I don't know why I'm not working, which sounds very similar to what Ricky Starks has been saying, which apparently seems at least somewhat similar to what Miro, in the very rare opportunity that anyone's gotten anything out of Miro, sounds like he just doesn't want to show up to work based on creative, but is otherwise healthy. Those guys, like if you're a Malachi Black, there was just a report right before I went live with the show that people in WWE view Aleister Black as being a guy with legitimate main event singles potential. And I agree. And I have been wondering for years now, why is Malachi Black not in a main event position? Why are Buddy Matthews and Brody King not chasing secondary gold? Or why didn't Malachi have a singles title and Buddy and Brody could have gone off and had the tag team titles? What are we doing? So if you're Malachi Black, you leave. There's not even a second thought. If you're Miro, whenever that contract comes up, you go back. If you're Ricky Starks, who apparently is going to be working against Santana, I forget what the name of the promotion is, but it looks like at least for now, Ricky Starks is going to be allowed to go have a match elsewhere. Like, you're not going back to AEW. There's no grander plan in place. There's no invasion angle of all the disgruntled wrestlers that Tony Khan has forgotten about all the toys that are sitting at the bottom of the toy box. Those guys are done. There's no chance that they're going to get used. They're going to go to WWE, and they're going to be made to look like legitimate stars. And I'll tell you what, here's the one positive, okay? If you're like me, and you're currently sort of a disaffected or a disgruntled AEW fan, here's the good news. At least a lot of the people that you like that aren't getting presented on TV, they'll have the chance to go to WWE, and that company right now certainly looks like they know how to turn those people into stars, or to take whatever star power they had and elevate it exponentially. That's maybe the only good takeaway that I can have as somebody who continues to question what the hell AEW is doing. Now, I didn't mean for this to become this big indictment on AEW. That was supposed to come a little bit later on in the show. But it just goes to show you what a little bit of star power and a little bit of effort into presenting a guy like Penta can do. I lost my mind. Like, again, great presentation, promo's wonderful, match is great. Seems like they're going to sell a shit ton of Penta masks, which again brings me back to another point. And it's something that I still don't fully understand. Why is it that AEW never sold a Penta mask? Like, seriously, do you remember ever seeing a Penta mask? I don't. I've been to a few AEW live shows. I don't remember seeing Penta and Phoenix masks. I do remember recently when AEW released a hologram mask that looked like something you would have ordered on Wish.com, cheaply made with cheap materials. I do remember that. But apparently Penta's merch sales are already through the roof. And when Rey Fenix makes the jump, he'll sell a shit ton of merch too. Also came out this week that apparently his merch section in shop.aew.com, that apparently his merch is just gone. It's a 404 dead end. So either he's on his way to WWE, maybe they worked out an NDA in exchange for releasing him early because it seemed like he probably didn't have an NDA in the first place, and he was going to burn AEW to the ground on the way out, pulling back the curtain on some things. Perhaps they worked out an NDA in exchange for his early release, and maybe he'll show up at the Royal Rumble. Who knows? But Phoenix is going to sell a lot of merch, and Phoenix is going to be a star in WWE. And again, those two have been with you the entire time. Those two have put on some of the best tag team matches in the history of the company, and they didn't get so much as a goodbye on the way out. They didn't get so much as a final run as the Lucha Bros on TV. You didn't, like, the whole idea. I know I'm all over the place, but, like, this is how frustrating it is. The old adage of, like, a guy is leaving, he should be putting over talent on the way out. There is truth to that. The idea that, like, a guy might not want to put anyone over on the way out, so you just ice him and you keep him off TV because it's going to, like, kill off any impact that he has as a moneymaker for the next company. Those days are dead. Again, if you don't live online and you don't live in this, like, toxic internet wrestling community discourse between WWE and AEW tribalists, if you just saw Penta and heard Luchador and you looked it up on YouTube, guess what? You're going to find Penta matches. So they've iced Penta out for months. And guess what? He shows up in WWE, and it's as if it's almost like he walked off of Collision, which he didn't, but it's as if he walked off Collision, had a day, and then showed up on Raw on Monday. It was like he hadn't missed a step. Now, did he look a little bit rusty? Maybe. But in the eyes of the fans, it was like no time had passed. And guess what? Icing Rey Fenix ain't going to help. Because he's going to show up and look like a star. And if Ricky Starks makes the jump, guess what? Icing him out for months or a year, it's not going to help at all. He's going to come back and look like a star. And guess what? Miro, icing him out for a year, whether it's him or it's you, it's not going to help because people are going to be happy to see him back. Malachi Black wrestles sporadically. He's going to show up maybe at the Rumble. He's going to get a massive pop, and people are going to be thrilled to have Aleister Black on TV. It just feels like mismanagement after mismanagement, and it is so damn frustrating because there are people that AEW continues to invest time in, invest story in, and I just don't get it, and I don't see it. See Yuta, Wheeler, and see Garcia, Daniel, and see Perry, Jack. None of those guys to me. None. Not one. Strike me as a guy that, like, 10 years from now is going to be one of the top stars in professional wrestling. Not one. I don't see it in Perry. I definitely don't see it in Yuta, and I don't really see it in Garcia. If I had to pick one, I guess it would be Garcia. Maybe. But probably not. But those guys have gotten a lot more TV time. Those guys have been involved in programs with the Death Riders, have been involved in whatever the Elite Takeover was supposed to be, in spiking Tony Khan. And yet, none of it really matters. Genuinely, none of it matters. All that time feels like it's been wasted. Those matches, that match time on TV, feels like it has been wasted. And there were guys that you had in-house that could have been main event stars that you have just squandered. And at the very least, if you don't agree that Penta should have been a main event guy, if you don't agree that Malachi Black should have been a main event guy, I will simply point out to you, I would have rather had either of those guys with the TNT championship. I would have had those guys with a belt before I would have put one on Garcia or a Yuta or a Perry. I just don't get it. I don't understand what the process is. Those don't look like guys that you build the company around. There is one guy who I think you very well could build around who got a main event shot on Dynamite on Wednesday. We'll get there in a little bit. Now, I do want to kind of jump around because, like I said, the goal today wasn't just supposed to be to like shit on AEW, but here we are. I have been as supportive of that company as I can be. And I feel like it's not circling the drain because as long as you have money and you have the ability to promote, the company's going to exist. And I like a lot of the talents in AEW. And I still enjoy their matches. But creatively, I just don't fully understand what we're doing. And there are oversights. There are business oversights this company continues to commit. I'm going to hit you with a really egregious one. I saw this online, and I double and triple checked it because I thought there is no way on this earth that a company that just inked a multi-year deal with Warner Brothers Discovery to be on TNT, TBS, and Max, there is no chance that they could possibly screw up something as simple as getting dates right. And then I saw this. So AEW Grand Slam Australia, right, was supposed to be an outdoor show that got moved into an indoor arena. It's going to be shown on tape delay. It's supposed to happen on Saturday, February 15th. Again, on tape delay. And when does AEW say that this is going to go down? They say it's going to go on TNT and Max on Saturday, February 15th. What also happens on Saturday, February 15th, also at 8 p.m. Eastern? The NBA All-Star Night. Now, this is not the All-Star Game. That's on Saturday. But All-Star Saturday Night includes, but is not limited to, the three-point shooting contest, the slam dunk contest, all kinds of stuff that people genuinely care about. How the hell do you get this wrong? How the hell do you put out a promo, any kind of promotional material, advertising a show that you simply cannot show on TNT at the same time as the NBA? Am I to believe that the NBA is going to get bumped for AEW Grand Slam on tape delay? No. So what the hell's going on? Is it only going to go on Max? Because again, this was supposed to be a show that was going to be on pay-per-view that has since gotten moved to just the Collision spot. That's not good. That doesn't look good for anyone involved. It's honestly a very iffy at best situation. So that's a business oversight. Again, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how that happens. It seems pretty nonsensical to me. Feels like there are a lot of people getting paid a lot of money at the company that should, I don't know, maybe have like some kind of oversight, be able to kind of figure out what's happening and what's not. Next up, as we continue down this, what are they thinking? AEW lit the internet on fire again the other night because Tony Khan put out this graphic that Maximum Carnage, AEW Maximum Carnage Collision, a 12-man tag team match. So if you look at the right side of the graphic, you go, all right, rated FTR, Powerhouse Hobbs, who's in a world championship match on Dynamite, and then the Outrunners, okay, haven't seen them for a bit, but there they are. Taking on the Death Riders, okay, makes sense because at rated FTR and Hobbs don't like the Death Riders, and Hobbs is fighting Moxley for the world championship on Dynamite. But the Death Riders aren't fighting by themselves. They're teaming up with the Learning Tree, Chris Jericho and Brian Keith and Big Bill. Somebody please save Big Bill. Please? And even Brian Keith. Save them both. What are we doing? Okay, anyway. The Death Riders. These guys who hate everything about AEW, who hate ego, who hate people who aren't working hard. They're teaming with the Learning Tree. What? 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 Jon Moxley, who has never done a good job of directly telling you the point for why he tried to smother Bryan Danielson with a plastic bag and end his close friend's in-ring career, or at least his full-time in-ring career. That same guy who can't clearly articulate why he's doing what he's doing, who has played more riddles and more strange backstage segments and pre-recorded promos and just is in the midst of a storyline, the second takeover storyline of the year in AEW, still hasn't put together what the hell it means, so much so that at World's End, JR, is saying I don't understand what he wants. And nobody else on commentary can explain it either, JR, because nobody fucking knows, because that's just what AEW is right now. The World Heavyweight Championship is in a briefcase, presumably in pieces. No one actually knows. It's in a briefcase. And Jon Moxley doesn't want you to see it, but he doesn't want to tell you why he doesn't want you to see it. And he talks about ego and about complacency, and yet he's going to team with Chris Jericho, who he had a blood feud with at the start of AEW, lest we forget that the night that Chris Jericho won the AEW World Championship against Kenny Omega, Moxley came out and wiped them both out. So there's a blood feud between these two. But now all of a sudden they're going to team up in a 12-man tag match. Why else did this graphic piss me off? Because it very clearly showed you that Powerhouse Hobbs isn't going to win on Wednesday. Not that anybody thought he would. Not that anybody was like, hey, this is actually a great time to swerve the audience and put a belt, although it's the World Championship, put a belt on a guy who's been with you for 4 years and actually does look like a younger dude who looks like a star, has charisma and has an interesting background, has a background story that they tried to do once before with a book of Hobbs. This essentially told you, oh, Hobbs is going to lose. Spoiler alert, a bullshit 12-man tag match. Lazy, uninspired, bullshit creative. I remember when Collision first started, it was some of the best pro wrestling. This is what Collision is now. They killed off Rampage, right? Good. Too many shows. Too much time. Not booked well enough. Great. This is presumably the main event of Collision Maximum Carnage. A 12-man tag match featuring 3 guys who apparently hate the company and hate what it represents, who are then going to go with the most over-the-top gimmick in the entire company in the learning tree. What sense does that make? It makes none. It makes no sense. And by the way, they had Jericho try to explain it on Dynamite, and it didn't make any sense. Now, I bring this up because, as I said, it was pretty much a giveaway that Powerhouse Hobbs wasn't going to win the championship. But don't worry, there was more that happened between that graphic coming out and the main event. One of those things was we got to see the Women's Casino Gauntlet for a chance to face Mariah May for the Women's Championship. And who should make her debut? None other than somebody who had been rumored to be involved with the company, perhaps signed to the company for quite a while, and Megan Bayne. Do they do much of anything to put her over? There's a really great moment with a flying lariat on Chris Statlander. Does she go on to win the Casino Gauntlet? She does not. Who does end up winning? Toni Storm. I like Toni Storm a lot. I think Toni Storm has done some of the best work of her career in the last year plus. Timeless Toni Storm is incredible. This amnesia angle is hilarious. What's the problem? You're once again at a Toni Storm and Mariah May matchup. Why? Because it's in Australia. Great. Then what was the point of the Casino Gauntlet? Should have saved it until after the pay-per-view. There's a very simple way to have Toni Storm pick up a few more wins between now and that quote-unquote pay-per-view, that Grand Slam Australia. You could have just had her challenge Mariah May. There could have been a backstage segment that, oh, now Toni remembers who Mariah May is, or she shows that she's actually known all along and she's been acting like she doesn't remember. Something. You could have saved this Casino Gauntlet for after Grand Slam Australia. You chose not to. And it was to me, it was like a dead giveaway of what was going to happen. So did Megan Bayne get over in a big way? Not necessarily. Did she have a nice showing in this Casino Gauntlet? Sure. But that wasn't it. Something else that happened on Dynamite that was a very welcome arrival and return. Samoa Joe came back. We've all been hoping that Samoa Joe was going to come back. He comes and bails out Hook because Christian Cage and his cronies in the patriarchy were going to try to end Hook's career. Samoa Joe is back. We saw Taz get up from the table. Taz, who had knee surgery, was going to apparently go in and try to defend his son. Samoa Joe. So we're picking back up with Samoa Joe mentoring Hook. I liked that storyline when it was last left. I am here for Samoa Joe being the guy who's going to mentor Hook. I'm totally fine with it. I love it. Does it make a lot of sense to have Christian Cage involved with Hook still while he's carrying around that other briefcase or carrying around the contract that he can, in theory, cash in on Moxley or whoever the champion is? I don't know. I guess you have to have Christian doing something. That match was fine. Samoa Joe being back is a welcome addition. Also on this show, we saw MJF and Jeff Jarrett get into another promo battle. This was another good one, though, because this one was much more inspired. This one had a lot more cutting, scathing lines. And Jeff Jarrett essentially said, everything that you think you are right now, I was first. Every kind of barb that you think you could throw at me has already been thrown at me. Every kind of negative thing you could say has already been said a bunch of times over. MJF goes after him about being a recovering alcoholic, about his wife, about him being the last thing that fans see before their favorite company dies. There are a lot of good lines. Where the MJF Jeff Jarrett thing is going, I don't totally know. Like I've said before, I like Jeff Jarrett. I like Jeff Jarrett's presence on TV. I think that he could be a good behind-the-scenes guy. I don't necessarily know that we need to have Jeff Jarrett on every Dynamite cutting a promo. I think that it could be an intriguing thing to have him and MJF move off to Collision if this is going to be a thing. Gives you a reason to watch Collision. I don't know. Maybe they feel like they have to try to heat MJF back up because they've made him ice cold. I don't know. But that was an okay segment. That one didn't piss me off that much. But then we get to the main event because the main event is what pissed me off. Again, for very simple reasons. You have this guy. This dude. You have Powerhouse Hobbs, who has been with your company for 4 years, who shouted out in the ring last week when he won the Casino Gauntlet that Moxley is the guy who brought him into AEW and that he was going to make Mox his bitch. He said it to Mox's wife in the ring. I didn't think there was any chance they were going to put the championship on Hobbs. But what a moment that could have been. What a shock it could have been. And in fairness, I keep coming back to a very simple question. If all of these people hate the Death Riders so much, if Switchblade and Hangman and Orange Cassidy, if they all hate the Death Riders as much as we're supposed to believe they do, if Rated FTR hate the Death Riders as much as they say they do, including going on Twitter to say that Hobbs is ready for this moment, why is Rated FTR not out at the ring with Hobbs to protect him from the shenanigans of the Death Riders? Why is there nobody out there to protect Hobbs from taking a shot to the head from Marina Shafir with the briefcase? Why are Rated FTR not at the ring to make sure that Pac and Wheeler Yuta and Claudio don't interfere with the match? Because again, nothing makes sense. These guys are all involved. They all hate Moxley. They all hate the Death Riders. They all want to restore the spirit, restore the feeling, as Ospreay always likes to say, because it was a big thing online. Nobody's in the building? Oh, but they were in the building, because after Hobbs gets screwed with enough and after Moxley pins him, Rated FTR come out. I'm sitting there hoping, waiting for another young star, an actual guy that you could build the company around, perhaps comes out to back Hobbs. And instead I get Rated FTR, who again, I like Copeland and I like FTR a lot. They are not the guys that I want to see be the next wave of AEW. I don't care about Mox versus Cope. And if this whole thing, by the way, is just going to set up for Cope to beat Mox and then Christian to cash in on Cope, what a fucking lazy, boring storyline that will be. Are they going to swerve us? Or are we going to have Copeland loses to Mox at Revolution, but then Christian cashes in on Mox, but Copeland helps Christian because they're still these longtime friends, and he'd rather see Christian win and get the next shot instead of having Moxley, who probably cheats to win, keep the title. Like, I don't know. Man, I just don't care. I really don't, and I'm supposed to care about the world title program, and I don't. I'm bored. I'm actively annoyed whenever the Death Riders come on TV. I actively want to skip their matches. I don't care anymore. And it's not just me. It's really not. And it's not like anybody has to care what I think or book for what I want to see happen. But I don't know a single wrestling fan, genuinely. Of the wrestling fans I know, there's not a single soul right now who wants to see week in and week out what the Death Rider storyline is going to be. They fucking botched this months ago. They wasted their opportunity months ago. You thought perhaps that a Shane McMahon was going to be revealed as the guy pulling the strings behind the scene? Really cool idea. Did the fans create it themselves? Yeah. Did we see pictures of Shane McMahon with Tony Khan and the Young Bucks separately and think, maybe there's something there? Maybe. Yeah, we might have thought that. And perhaps you started connecting some dots and you thought that's going to be the payoff, and it hasn't happened. And then you saw the flare on all the promos for World's End, thinking, oh, Moxley signaling bringing somebody in. Didn't happen. We still don't know what the Death Riders want. You're months into this storyline. There's nothing to buy into. And by the way, nobody gives a shit about the spirit or the heart of AEW. Nobody cares. They didn't care when the Young Bucks spiked Tony Khan. They don't care now. None of it matters. People just want to enjoy watching a main event program. And as I outlined last week, I'd much rather watch this guy. I would have rather watched Malachi Black. I would have much rather watch Hangman and Swerve. Maybe even Ricochet. Switchblade. I would love any of these guys to be in a program for the world title. And instead, I'm getting Mox versus Cope. And when you have the chance to put the belt on a younger dude, on a guy with star power, on an absolute badass in Powerhouse Hobbs, you already tell the audience through a 12-man tag match graphic that he ain't winning it. What are we doing? What is AEW doing? And now I'm supposed to, in theory, buy in that, you have to let it play out. And I saw somebody responded on TikTok. While TikTok is still alive, you can go follow It's Just Wrestling there and on Instagram and Facebook and all that. But somebody said patience, because I said about Kenny Omega, which I didn't even get to, and I guess I could here in a second. But I complained last week that Kenny Omega came back, didn't have the God aura to him because he has this button-down shirt, rolled up sleeves, khakis, kind of looked like he was going to a happy hour after work, right? Doesn't have the same aura that he did when he showed up in New Japan and wrestled a crazy match against Gabe Kidd on the weekend. Okay. This person told me patience. You don't know where the stories are going. That's fine that I don't know where the stories are going. Based on the week-to-week booking, I don't think the people in the room know where the stories are going. And I don't think they've known for a good long while. I have another question. This is just a very simple question. Darby Allin, right? Darby was seen as being the guy who was going to try to lead for the soul and the heart of AEW. Crashed a car into the Death Riders truck. And now he's gone for months to go work on climbing Mount Everest, which he was trying to do last year, and then he got his foot broken and wasn't able to attempt it. But you had him as the face of this, we're going to fight for the soul of AEW, day one guy. Made sense. Now he's gone. And now the people fighting for the soul of AEW are 3 former WWE guys. I don't get what we're doing here. You have guys like Powerhouse Hobbs. I don't understand what we're doing here. I know that Hobbs has gotten hurt a few times. But that's a guy that you invest time in. That's a guy that you invest story in. That's a guy who could get over with a crowd. That's a guy who's believable. That's a guy who looks like an absolute badass and who, again, has an actual story to tell that could resonate with an audience. And instead, we get Wheeler Yuta and Daniel Garcia and maybe Jack Perry if he ever shows up again. What are we doing? Now, the Kenny Omega and Brian Cage match is where I'm going to end because to me, it was the most positive thing on the show. The aftermath of the match, maybe not so much. But this match itself was a very good sign of things to come. You put Kenny Omega in a match with a guy like Brian Cage who is physically capable somehow of doing everything that he is capable of doing, who can wrestle a ton of different styles of matches, a guy who can absolutely support and help Kenny work his way through a match if there are any lingering issues with diverticulitis. Now, again, based on Kenny's match against Gabe Kidd, doesn't look like he was physically limited. You fast forward to last night, Kenny Omega and Brian Cage had a really nice match to start the show. But here's my problem. It ends. We get the kind of beatdown coming. Ospreay helps clear the ring. Takeshita and Kenny is a really exciting program. It was exciting the last time it happened. I like the idea of Omega and Takeshita. Here's the problem. 2 weeks in a row, Kenny Omega's been on TV. 2 weeks in a row that he's been left kind of decimated by the opposition. This time he and Ospreay are both down in the ring as the Callis family looks back from the stage. Kenny, once again, is made to look like just another guy. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't work. I don't understand what they're trying to do with Kenny Omega. He's supposed to be the guy that you could build around. He should be a guy fighting for the soul and the heart of AEW. He should be a guy that's trying to save AEW from the Death Riders. He should be a guy asking questions about what happened to the Young Bucks. Where are they at? Where's Jack Perry? Where's Kazuchika Okada? Where are the guys who actively tried to cost him his career and hurt him when he was going to have to go out for surgery for diverticulitis? Where are those guys? Where's the face-off with those guys? Where's the attempt to try to reconcile what we saw on TV? There is none, because it's as if they forgot the entire storyline happened. But you know who didn't forget? The people who actively like Kenny Omega and want to see him succeed and want to see him on their TVs every week. Those are the people who remember. And instead of getting to see this guy who's been built to have a godlike aura, they're just seeing another dude doing matches. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work for anybody. They have a bunch of guys in this company who are capable of going out and having good matches or having great matches. It's all about the story and the buy-in. And at this point, one of the only guys in the company who is a day one guy who has the actual story behind him, who has the actual, logical leap to being the guy who would try to defend the company, they have that guy, and they continue to actively not promote him. They continue to actively not use him in an important role. And I don't get it. And I'm pretty sure I'm never going to get it. Because at this point, you're 2 weeks in. How long do you need to let the program breathe before you say, oh, you know what? They might not have a good plan for Kenny. They've known for how long he was going to be coming back, and this is what they're putting him into. Back into a feud with the Don Callis family. And again, the match with Takeshita will be great. And if Kenny fights Fletcher, the match is going to be great. And we saw a very good match against Cage. And if he were to fight Lance Archer, it'd be a nice match as well. But I thought at some point you're supposed to build a story. What's the story? Where is the story with AEW right now? If you had to zoom out, let's go 10,000 foot view. What is the story in AEW right now? What's the thing that brings you back as a fan every week? It's not the Death Riders. Does Swerve and Ricochet do it for you? Has that gotten to a place yet where you feel good about that? Is there anything going on in the tag team division? No. The Hurt Syndicate in a trios match pin Private Party, presumably setting up that they're going to go after tag team gold, which also doesn't make sense because why isn't Shelton Benjamin trying to get the TNT title or the Continental title? Why isn't Lashley doing that? Or why isn't Lashley in a main event program right now going for the world title? Again, it makes no sense. So the tag titles don't really matter. The trios titles are on the Death Riders. They don't really matter. The World Heavyweight Championship doesn't matter. Mercedes is going to have really good matches, but hasn't really found a dance partner outside of Chris Statlander for the TBS Championship. Mariah May's back in there with Toni Storm again for whatever reason. They're going back to that one more time. Is that a story that you still believe in that well? I don't know. I think it kind of cooled off. I thought they were ready to move on from it, but apparently not. Okada and Omega, months and months away at All In Texas. Is that a story that you buy into? It's not one that I'm buying into yet. It's months and months away. So again, what's the match that's supposed to make you want to come back to the show every week? To this point, there are none. I continue to come back out of habit, and I continue to come back because I ultimately want to see the company succeed, and I happen to believe that there are stars in that company who could go to another level and either help AEW pull itself back up or will eventually leave and go to WWE and become bigger stars. But at this point, I just don't, there's nothing right now that feels like it's must watch on the show. There are talents who I will actively seek out their segments and their matches, but as a whole, do I get as excited to watch AEW at this point? No. Is Collision much must watch right now? No. And you put out a 12-man tag graphic that makes no sense? No. Will I still watch it or check in on it? I will, because I do this show. If I weren't doing this show, would I actively look to watch anything on Collision this week? Probably not. But that's where I'm at the end of this week. Now, there are a lot of other things that we could get to. There are a ton of things, and, SmackDown kind of is what it is right now, and it's not driving me up the wall in the best way. But there was one last thing that came out, and it broke on Twitter, as I mentioned at the start of the show, just before we came on. But it's an agreement between the WWE and TNA, and it's a press release that they put out where they talked about this unprecedented crossover opportunity between WWE and TNA. So we're going to pull up the press release that WWE and TNA put out jointly, and I'll give you some high-level thoughts on what I think it ultimately could mean and whether or not it's a good thing or not. Now, I think if you're a TNA fan, it is a good thing. There are people that always like to argue about whether or not this has been a more beneficial partnership with WWE than the one that they had previously with AEW. AEW tended to send a few more of their star-level people, like when Kenny Omega was the world champion. I'm not exactly sure that having some of the NXT people that have been on TNA have been the most helpful, but I think the exposure is good, and the exposure for the company as a whole is good. But here you go. WWE and TNA Wrestling announced multi-year partnership. NXT superstars and TNA wrestling stars to appear across weekly WWE and TNA programming, WWE premium live events, and TNA pay-per-views. And so they have this whole thing about the unprecedented crossover opportunities. It's going to enable talent to garner additional exposure across key WWE and TNA programming, including weekly flagship shows like NXT on the CW, TNA Impact, select WWE premium live events, and TNA pay-per-views. In turn, bolstering their in-ring development with exposure to world-class talent and coaching. Now, listen, you can say what you want to say about whether or not this partnership has worked to this point, and whether or not WWE was going to poach Jordynne Grace and Joe Hendry and leave TNA with nothing to show for this somewhat limited partnership to this point. It's hard to look at this and feel like it's anything but a win for TNA. Because one of two things was going to happen here, right? There was a path that like WWE was just going to poach your talent no matter what. In this case, you're getting the continual exposure. Will WWE on NXT start promoting TNA pay-per-views on their TV? That would be interesting. Is TNA now going to promote NXT PLEs on Peacock? That will be interesting. It certainly appears as though the Genesis pay-per-view is going to be the first real crossover because TNA put out a video, and I don't know how this works with them and how they respond to this kind of stuff on YouTube, but it is simply promoting something they put on their own social media account. But there was here it is. So this was the trailer that they put out. Maybe I'll show it to you guys here without any of the sound. I think that might help us get around it. But they put this out. Hashtag TNA Genesis at WWE NXT this Sunday. And then here's your trailer. So you get very clearly like a hype video, including the NXT logo, including the TNA logo. And then here it is. The chance of TNA in the background. You get TNA Genesis NXT. Here's the lasting image. This is the thing that stands out to you and makes you say, all right, they are officially co-branding. Like there is no getting around it. Now, it's a TNA pay-per-view. How are they going to split the revenue on pay-per-view? How are they going to split the gate? No one knows. Doesn't really matter to you as a fan. Doesn't really matter to me. Presumably matters to those companies. But you're getting a TNA and NXT co-branded pay-per-view. It's interesting. Now, again, will we see Obafemi pop up in TNA? Who knows? Are we going to see Ethan Page? Or no. Let me think. Could we maybe see Nick Nemeth show up at the Royal Rumble? Would he be Dolph Ziggler or would he be Nick Nemeth? Will the Hardys show up with the tag team titles at the Royal Rumble? Will we go that far? Will we see TNA talent on Raw and SmackDown? Could there be another invasion angle? Presumably you can't do an invasion angle if you're a partnered company. It then feels like, well, of course, you're working together. Now, could they try to build a storyline where, yes, we're partners, but we need to show that we're the better promotion? Yeah, like you could maybe do that. Ultimately, it feels like TNA is becoming, for better or worse, a feeder system for NXT / the WWE. Now, if you want to talk about whether that's good or not for the lifelong opportunity that TNA has and the long-term future of the company, I'd say that, yeah, it probably is. Because could this exposure eventually get you to a point where they can negotiate a better deal as part of Anthem to move to a bigger network than just Access TV? Maybe it does. If the ratings actually start to pop or they start getting a bigger social following, could they maybe figure out a way to get on another platform? It's entirely possible. And you're also getting additional reps for your best stars in TNA, potentially. And WWE is getting actual live TV reps, seeing how their NXT talent perform in front of another audience. It's a win-win for both of these companies. Now, the sad thing is, if you're AEW and you're looking at this from the outside, WWE is now working with TNA. They've sent some talent like Omos to Noah. You have New Japan and sort of have CMLL, I guess. The downside is New Japan just lost their TV deal in the U.S. I don't know how many people are actively watching CMLL. You don't have a place right now where you could get weekly episodic TV reps for some of your younger talent. Like if you were going to send a Yuta, a Garcia, a Perry for months to go somewhere else to get those live reps every week, it would have been nice if you had a partnership with TNA and you could have sent them over there and made it look like they had signed talent contracts with TNA or announced something like this where there's a partnership, but you don't have that. I think one of the biggest problems that AEW faces right now is that their young talent especially don't get enough reps. They don't have a touring schedule. They have 2 shows. They have Ring of Honor. They, for whatever reason, seem to refuse to have some of those talent develop down in Ring of Honor and allow more of the big stars to get weekly episodic time on Dynamite and Collision. They won't do a brand split. AEW, I think, needed something like this. I think it would have helped their talent tremendously. And instead, WWE swooped in, inked a deal with TNA. It appears to have been a very positive partnership to this point, and now it's a multi-year agreement. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments section of the show. You can like the video, share the video, and subscribe. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you like and subscribe to It's Just Wrestling on YouTube. You can find the show on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. For as long as TikTok is still a thing, you can find it there as well. You can follow me. My whole handle's been down here the whole time, at JoyOnBroad. Send your feedback. You want to send a DM to the Instagram account or to Facebook? Feel free. You want to send a DM on Twitter? Feel free. I'll talk to all of you next Thursday here on It's Just Wrestling. Between now and then, just remember, even if somebody says something that hurts your feelings about your favorite pro wrestling company, just take a deep breath and remember, more than anything else, before you get angry, just remember, it's just wrestling. I'll talk to all of you next week. Have a great day, everybody.